El Chapo had made a brief but desperate call to someone he hoped would help him get out of Culiacan before the Mexican Navy descended upon him. That call was tracked and led the Mexican Navy to a house in Libertad, but there was a problem. The door would not budge, no matter how much the Navy pounded on it. Later, it was found that the door was not only reinforced using steel, but it had been custom made to have water on the inside, which would prevent the door from breaking down due to the Mexican heat. It took the Navy 10 minutes to finally break it down, after which they entered only to find there was nobody there. But there was a clue, a bathtub that had been raised using hydraulic lifts. Under that tub lay stairs into a hidden underground passage. The Mexican Navy had missed El Chapo by mere minutes. Welcome to our second episode of El Chapo's mistake that led to his arrest. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, and if you haven't seen our first episode on El Chapo, just go straight to our previous upload to stay updated. The Marines sent to storm the building quickly started making their way through the hidden tunnel, only to find that it opened up in the Culiacan seaway system. Above ground, troops flooded into the street to block exits out of the region and prevent El Chapo from escaping on foot. A US drone was also deployed, which started scanning manholes so it could alert the Navy if El Chapo emerged from any of them. In the sewers, the Navy discovered a tactical vest on one of the many paths they could take, following it until they reached a storm drain that led out of a river 1 mile away from the house they had raided. The Navy had lost the trail and El Chapo had escaped once again. Still, the net was closing around the drug lord. Soon after the failed raid, Mexican authorities captured El Picudo, also known as Mario Lopez. El Picudo detailed how El Chapo made his escape. He exited the storm drain the Navy discovered and was picked up in a vehicle by El Picudo. Aides met them driving south of Culiacan, where El Chapo switched vehicles before being transported to another location. For a moment, it would have felt like El Chapo was out of the Navy's grasp, were it not for one of the key details. He had been accompanied during his escape by a bodyguard named Ramirez. Another raid followed, this time on Ramirez's home, but it came up empty. But then, another fortunate breakthrough. On February 20, 2014, Ramirez turned on his BlackBerry cell phone to send a text to a fellow cartel member. Mexican authorities caught and tracked the signal, which led them to the Sinaloa resort of Mazatlan. The Mexican Marines believed that they may have missed their chance, thinking that El Chapo had already escaped to Sierra Madre in all of the confusion. Still, they decided to conduct a raid on the hotel to which the signal led them anyway. If nothing else, they might capture Ramirez and get one step closer to El Chapo. He had ended up getting a lot more than a bodyguard. As evening drew close on February 21, 2014, 40 members of the Mexican Navy converged at Mazatlan. They weren't alone. Mexican agents from US Marshal Service, Department of Homeland Security, and DEA linked up with the Marines, with all working together to pinpoint Ramirez's location, the Hotel Mirama. The problem was that the hotel was a 12-story building containing dozens of rooms in which Ramirez and possibly El Chapo might be hiding. Knowing these variables could lead to another escape if they weren't careful. The Marines descended on the building on February 22, condoning it off before entering to quiz the staff. There, they discovered that 2 rooms had been rented out the previous day. One of those rooms had to contain Ramirez. The Marines divided into 2 teams, with one making its way to the 6th floor of the hotel to storm one of the 2 rooms. No Ramirez, just a pair of American tourists who awoke to the sounds and sights of half a dozen soldiers. At the same time, another team of 6 Marines made their way to the 4th floor and apartment 401. Jackpot, Ramirez was standing outside the door armed with an AK-47 rifle. There was no dramatic shootout as Ramirez surrendered his weapon without a fight. But wait a second, if Ramirez was standing outside the door, that would suggest somebody was with him. Was El Chapo in the apartment? Marines stormed the room, discovering El Chapo's personal shelf and babysitter in one of the bedrooms, along with his 2 children, Maria and Mali. In the other bedroom was the target they had spent so long and so many field operations trying to catch. El Chapo was in the room with his wife, with both surrendering without the Navy having to fire a shot. Within 3 minutes of the raiding beginning, El Chapo was under arrest. The Mexican Navy had its man. By the time El Chapo's dramatic arrest, the Sinaloa Cartel was believed to be operating in 50 countries. The American Attorney General Eric Holder hailed his capture as a landmark achievement, noting that El Chapo's criminal activities had affected the lives of millions of people around the world, not only due to drug addiction, but the violence and corruption that allowed his cartel to prosper. El Chapo was sent to Altiplano prison. There, he would wait a trial that would likely sentence him to spend the rest of his life in prison. However, the elusive escape artist had one more trick up his sleeve. He knew the prison, which was 55 miles west of Mexico, was vulnerable, and besides, he had escaped from a high-security facility before. As Mexico navies, along with most major American law enforcement bureaus, celebrated El Chapo's arrest, the crime lord was plotting another daring escape. The escape would take place on July 11, 2015 at 8:52 p.m. On that day, an alert bled out at Altiplano prison. It had been roughly 15 minutes since prison guards had seen El Chapo. The last sighting was when the drug lord received his daily medicine before heading back to his cell, and he was no longer visible on the prison's internal security cameras. Guards headed down to El Chapo's cell only to find nothing except a small opening in the shower area, measuring about 2 square feet. The opening held a ladder made using PVC piping that was roughly the same size as El Chapo, 5 feet and 6 inches. The drug lord had climbed down the ladder into the tunnel that extended for about a mile underground. As investigators followed the trail, they discovered a motorbike adapted to roll on rails that they believe El Chapo henchmen they used to transport tools as they built the tunnel. The tunnel ended at a half-finished house in a construction site, a mile away from Altiplano. In that home, investigators found another tunnel that was roughly the same size as the one in El Chapo's cell. Through the tunnel, the drug lord had once again escaped and was free to conduct his business once again. Another inquest was held, with 18 of the guards at Altiplano being squeezed to find out if they were culpable in the escape. A new manhunt was underway. This time, the Mexican Navy wouldn't have to wait years to get their man. El Chapo managed to spend 6 months on the run before he was tracked to the northwestern city of Los Mochis, thanks to a tip received from an anonymous civilian working in tandem with several US agencies, just as they had when they captured the drug lord in Mazatlan. The Navy created a plan they dubbed Operation Black Swan. El Chapo will be captured dead or alive. At 4:40 a.m. on January 6, 2016, 17 elite units of Mexican Marines converged on 102 Duquiplan Boulevard, the house in which El Chapo had been staying. According to the tip, they chose this time because they believed the drug lord would be sleeping, with his guards also likely to be tired after a long night of keeping watch. They wouldn't be prepared for what was about to come. A signal was given and the Marines stormed the house. They were confronted by about a dozen cartel gunmen, collectively armed with 50 caliber machines and a grenade launcher. Those gunmen proved no match for the Marines. A firefight ensued, leaving 5 of the cartel members dead. GoPro footage later released on the Mexican TV show Primero Noticias shows the Marine in action, moving from room to room and unleashing hails of bullets and grenades whenever they encountered a threat. Not all those the Marines encountered died at their hands. After clearing the downstairs portion of the house, Marines moved upstairs and began clearing more rooms. They found 2 men in one of the rooms, with both being taken into custody. A sweep of the bathroom revealed 2 women laying on the floor. One of those women was the same chef who had been in the hotel with El Chapo when he was captured in 2014. Again, both were arrested. After about 15 minutes of fighting, the house was under the Marines' control. After all was said and done, the Mexican Marines had also discovered a weapon cache containing a pair of M16 rifles with grenade launchers, a loaded rocket-propelled grenade launcher, and 2 Barrett M82 anti-material rifles. Fortunately for the Marines, El Chapo's henchmen hadn't been able to get to the catcher before they were taken out. But there was a problem. They still had not found El Chapo. With the fighting having died down, the Marines quickly deduced that El Chapo had been hiding in one of the bedrooms found on the first floor, the only room the Marines hadn't been able to enter as it had been barricaded. The Marines got to work, removing furniture and pounding away at the door, finding several hidden doors along the way. Before they finally entered the room, they discovered El Chapo was still living in luxury, even while on the run. The bedroom contained several bags of high-end clothing stores, bread, empty cookie wrappers, and a king-sized bed. The Marines also found medicines, including antibiotics, cough syrup, and strangely, testosterone. Further investigation of the house discovered El Chapo had equipped it with a flat-screen TV and an internet connection. A DVD box set of La Reunión de Sur, a Mexican telenovela, lay on the bed. That little detail is interesting because the star of that show, Kate Del Castillo, had reportedly been in talks with El Chapo to take part in the creation of a film chronicling the drug lord's life, but still no El Chapo. Then the breakthrough. The search of the bedroom revealed a mirror containing light fixture. Within the fixture lay a handle that once activated opened a secret door in the bedroom that led down into yet another escape tunnel. El Chapo was once again prepared for the Marines and had used the tunnel he favored so much when transporting drugs to evade them. Following the tunnels revealed that they led down into Los Mochis sewer system. For a moment, all felt lost. After all, El Chapo had a 20-minute head start on the Marines as they had spent 15 minutes clearing the house and another 5 breaking into and searching the kingpin's bedroom. El Chapo had escaped once again, but his glory would be short-lived. Surveillance footage showed El Chapo and one of his lieutenants emerging from a manhole nearby, from which they quickly stole 2 cars so they could flee. Those thefts would be their undoing, as one of the carjacking victims called the police, allowing Mexican Marines to track the car El Chapo used in his getaway. Reports vary on what happened next. ABC News, reporting on the accounts delivered by Primero Noticias, says that El Chapo and his lieutenant were stopped by the Mexican Federal Police on a highway as they attempted to escape the city. The 4 officers who made the arrest, about 12 miles outside of Los Mochis, were informed that 40 cartel assassins were on their way to free El Chapo. The drug lord had even attempted to bribe the officers with cash, homes, and jobs, only to tell them they are all going to die for their role in his arrest. The officers' superiors told them to avoid the counterattack by El Chapo to the Dos Motel, with the Mexican Navy arriving to take the 58-year-old drug lord to the Los Mochis airport so he could be transferred to a holding facility in Mexico. Time magazine offers a different account. It claimed that after the owner of the hijacked car contacted the police, the Mexican Marines tracked El Chapo to a nearby hotel. The drug lord must have felt like he had escaped once again, only for the Marines to burst into his hotel, where they forced the 50 and exhausted cartel boss to surrender by gunpoint. Either way, El Chapo was once again in custody. This time, the Mexican and US authorities decided that El Chapo needed to be incarcerated outside of his home country. He was expedited to the US to stand trial. On July 17, 2019, he finally received his sentence, life in prison, with 30 years to run consecutively to the life sentence on charges that included 26 drug-related offenses and a murder conspiracy. El Chapo would also have to pay $12.6 billion in forfeiture, meaning every asset he owned would be seized while he served his time. El Chapo's Sinaloa Cartel empire was shattered. The drug lord is now in prison at ADX Florence in Colorado, but his story hasn't ended yet.